He mocked me for years, stole my ideas, and called me worthless. Then one day, he walked into my office for an interview. He didn't recognize me at first. You ever sit in a room so tense it makes your insides curl? That was me. Every Monday morning, 10 sharp, corner seat in a glass-walled conference room that felt more like a cage. My name is Mitch Langston, and for 7 straight years, I worked under a man who made those rooms feel like execution chambers. His name was Charles Whitmore, though everyone just called him Chuck. Short guy with perfect hair and a louder-than-life voice, the kind who measured success by how many people he could make feel small before lunch. Chuck had this trick where he would read your project summary out loud in a meeting, smile like he was impressed, then casually ask, "Who helped you with this?" Like there was no chance I could have written it myself. Every time he said something like that, laughter would trickle across the table from the other execs. Fake, rehearsed, a show, and I would just sit there, nodding like a puppet, pretending it did not sting. Truth is, it hurt every damn time. I remember one meeting, clear as yesterday. I had spent 2 weeks putting together a full market analysis, staying late every night, skipping meals. Chuck pulled up my PowerPoint, and flipped through like it was a comic book. Then he stopped, pointed to one chart, and said, "This is what I've been saying for months," and just moved on. Not a single word about who made it. Not even a glance my way. That was Chuck. He did not fire people. He made them disappear by draining every ounce of self-worth they had until they quit. But me? I stayed. Not because I loved the place. I stayed because I was learning, watching, taking notes. I figured if I was going to be invisible, I might as well become dangerous while no one was looking. Behind the scenes, I started picking up skills. Programming, data modeling. I even got certified in product management during lunch breaks. I said yes to everything no one else wanted. Beta testing, client follow-ups, training juniors. Stuff that did not make you shine, but taught you everything. I became fluent in the machinery of the company, while Chuck saw me as background noise. That was his mistake. But even as I built my secret future, day by day, there was this one thought that never left me. If I ever make it out of here, I'll never become him. That promise kept me alive in that office. I did not know it then, but my escape plan had already started. Quiet, steady, and one day, it was going to lead to something Chuck would never see coming. It was a Thursday when I finally snapped. Not in the dramatic, flipping the desk over way. I am talking about a quiet snap, the kind where something just shuts off inside you. You stop hoping, stop needing approval. You just let go. Chuck had brought in a new client, some Silicon Valley upstart with deep pockets and no patience. The project was high profile, and naturally, Chuck handed it to one of his favorites, Greg, a guy who wore flashy socks and never opened Excel without asking for help. 3 days in, Greg was already sinking. So Chuck did what he always did, turned to the nobody to fix it. He came into my cubicle without even knocking, dropped a thumb drive on my desk, and said, "Make this sparkle. I want something I can show the board by Monday." No thank you. No context. Just dumped it like trash. And then he walked away, already talking on his Bluetooth about golf or whatever nonsense filled his head when he was not making people feel like dirt. I stared at that thumb drive for maybe 10 minutes. Then I plugged it in. The files were a disaster. Half-finished graphics, outdated market data, typos everywhere. I could have refused. Could have said, "This is not my mess to clean." But instead, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. And I did more than fix it. I rebuilt it from scratch. I worked through the weekend, running on gas station coffee and playlists full of angry guitars. By Monday morning, the presentation looked like it came straight out of a TED Talk. Chuck smiled when he saw it. One of those cold, satisfied smirks that meant, "This will make me look good." He walked into the boardroom with my work in his hands and never once said who created it. But this time, I felt nothing. Not rage. Not sadness. Just silence. That was the moment I knew I had outgrown this place. I walked back to my desk, opened a browser, and clicked Submit on a job application I had been working on in secret. Then I emailed myself every non-proprietary file I had ever created, designs, case studies, templates I had built from scratch. I cleaned my digital house. And just like that, I was done playing his game. What I did not expect was what happened 2 weeks later. An email. No subject. No body. Just a calendar invite from someone I had met once, months ago, at a tech conference in Austin. The meeting title? Let's talk about building something better. I clicked, accept. And that single click would change everything. When I finally handed in my resignation, there was no confrontation, no raised voices. Just a short letter printed neatly and left on Chuck's desk before he came in that morning. I did not even stick around to watch him read it. By the time he showed up, 15 minutes late, as usual, I was already in my car, heading downtown for my first meeting with the people behind that mysterious invite. It turned out the guy from Austin, Miles Chin, had been watching me longer than I thought. He had heard about me through a few shared contacts, seen the little pieces I had put out into the world, white papers, open source code, even a few blog posts I had written under a fake name. Apparently, I had left a trail, and people were starting to notice. Miles ran a small but growing product design firm, lean and smart, the kind of place where nobody wore ties and everyone knew how to solve problems fast. When I stepped into their office, it felt like the air was different, lighter, faster. I was not used to that. We sat in a bare conference room with whiteboards on every wall. Miles slid a single-page printout across the table, their roadmap. At the top, in bold black marker, was a mission I had dreamed about for years: build things that make life simpler. I said yes before he finished the pitch. The first year was hard. I was used to being invisible, used to people ignoring my ideas. So when someone looked at me and asked, "What do you think?" it took a second to realize they meant it. But I adapted. I learned how to speak up. I learned how to lead. And slowly, I started rising. What began as a consulting contract turned into a full-time offer. Then a promotion. Then another. By the time year 3 rolled around, I was heading the strategy team, building systems that would eventually catch the eye of investors with serious pull. We launched a product that exploded, a workflow tool for remote teams, stripped of all the bloated nonsense. Clean, fast, addictive. Within months, companies were lining up to license it. And for the first time, I was not hiding behind anyone else's name. My name was on the patent application. My name was on the press release. I had become what Chuck used to pretend to be. Then one Thursday morning, I got the call. HR said we had a final interview lined up for a senior operations role. High-level candidate. Long resume. Last-minute submission from a recruiter we trusted. "Do you want to sit in?" they asked. I glanced at the name in the email, and I froze. There it was, clear as day. Charles Whitmore. And just like that, the past walked back into my life. I stared at that name for a long time. Charles Whitmore. It had been nearly 5 years since I walked out of that building for the last time, and yet the moment I saw those 2 words, everything rushed back. The belittling smirks. The way he leaned back in his chair while tearing someone down, like he was doing them a favor. That hum of fluorescent lights over a desk that always felt too small. I had not thought about Chuck in months. Life had moved on. I had moved on. But suddenly, there he was, applying for a position that would have once made him my boss. Now, he would be reporting to me. I told HR to proceed as planned. Keep everything standard. No special treatment. And so, on a Wednesday morning, in a sleek glass meeting room with views of the city skyline, I sat across from the man who once made me feel like nothing. He looked older, a little heavier around the face. His hair, still perfect, but the confidence had softened into something I could not quite name, something close to desperation. He stepped in, shook hands with the coordinator, and then turned to me. At first, no recognition, just a generic nod. Then it hit him. His eyes paused, just a beat too long. He tried to mask it, but I saw the flicker. That flash of panic when a ghost shows up where you least expect it. He did not say my name, probably hoping I would not say his either. I smiled, calm, steady, professional. And then I asked the first question. "Walk me through your last role. Specifically, the transition out." He stumbled. Not outright, but enough that I could see him adjusting. He kept using buzzwords, talking in wide loops, dodging specifics. The kind of dance I had watched him force others to perform. Now he was the one sweating in the spotlight. As he spoke, I kept notes not on his resume, but on his tells. His rehearsed lines. His small lies tucked between phrases like strategic alignment and organizational restructuring. But I said nothing. I asked follow-ups. I nodded like any other interviewer. He did not ask about me. Not once. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because if he truly did not remember who I was, then he had not changed. If he did remember and pretended not to, that was even worse. As the interview wrapped, I thanked him for his time and stood up to shake his hand again. "Good to see you, Charles," I said, using his full name, slow and clear. His eyes twitched, just for a second. Then he turned and walked out. And I was left standing there, heartbeat steady, knowing what came next would be mine to decide. But I had not made my decision yet. Not completely. That would come after I opened the reference file. After the interview, I sat in my office with the door closed, blinds drawn halfway. The reference packet sat on my screen like a sealed letter from a version of me that no longer existed. I opened it. At first, it was the usual stuff: employment verification, titles, start and end dates. Then came the comments from former colleagues. Anonymous, of course, but honest. One line stood out. Brilliant at protecting himself. Terrible at protecting his team. Another. Created chaos, then stepped back and blamed others for the fallout. And this one hit me like a punch to the chest. He does not remember names unless he is about to fire you. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. So it was not just me. Chuck had burned bridges everywhere he went, always moving up before the flames caught him. Until, eventually, they did. His last position had ended quietly. A mutual parting, according to the report. But buried in the notes was a word I had never seen tied to him before. Redundancy. They had let him go because they no longer needed him. All those years pretending to be irreplaceable, and someone finally called his bluff. I clicked through to the last section: candidate comments. He had filled it out himself. There it was, in his own words. I am looking for a team that values experience, clear leadership, and knows how to cut through the noise. Cut through the noise. That phrase used to echo in those awful team meetings. Chuck would say it every time he ignored feedback, every time he shut someone down. Now it just sounded hollow. I closed the file and sat in silence for a long while. Not because I needed more time to think, but because I knew I was about to do something that would define me more than any promotion or title ever had. I picked up the phone, called HR, told them my decision, but I did not stop there. I asked them to include one sentence in the final email. One sentence that would end everything the right way. Thank you for your interest, Charles. Unfortunately, this is not the right fit. No drama, no retaliation, just clarity. But what I did not expect was what happened the next morning. And that flipped everything on its head. The next morning, around 9:15, I was reviewing feedback on our latest product rollout when my assistant poked her head in. She looked uneasy. There is someone here asking to speak with you. No appointment. I asked who. She hesitated. Charles Whitmore. For a second, I thought maybe I had misheard her. Maybe she meant someone else. But no, she repeated it. Charles Whitmore. Standing in our lobby. I told her to send him up. Not out of politeness. I just needed to see how this man, once so high on his throne, would handle the one thing he never believed he would have to face. Accountability. He stepped into my office like someone walking into a courtroom. Suit crisp, hairstyled, but his eyes looked tired. He did not sit down right away. Just stood there, hands clasped in front of him. I waited. Finally, he spoke. I was not sure if you remembered me. That was his opening line. After everything. After years of backhanded insults and sabotage and stolen credit. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, I remember everything. That shook him more than I expected. He looked at the floor, then back at me. I came to say something I probably should have said a long time ago. I leaned back, arms folded. Go on. He took a breath. One of those heavy, reluctant ones that taste like rust. I was wrong. About you. About a lot of people. I thought results were all that mattered. I thought power was about control. And I used that to cover up the fact that I was scared. Of being forgotten. That hit me harder than I thought it would. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because, for a split second, I saw the man behind the armor. He went on. I know you do not owe me anything. I just needed to face the fact that I burned a lot of bridges. And you? You built something real. He looked up. I respect that. He was waiting for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe permission to leave with a scrap of dignity. But I was not here to grant either. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Charles, I said, you were right about one thing. He paused in the doorway. You were wrong. Then I nodded once, sharp and final. He walked out without another word. And just like that, the man who once ruled my world disappeared into the hallway, smaller than I ever remembered. But the past? It had not fully let go yet. Because later that week, I found out something that changed everything I thought I knew about him, and about myself. 2 days after that encounter, I was digging through our old archives, just organizing, clearing out dead weight, when I stumbled on something I had not seen in years. A folder labeled Legacy Projects, Acquisition Era. Most of it was junk. outdated files from companies we had absorbed or partnered with. But one subfolder caught my eye. It had Chuck's old initials, CW, buried in the metadata of a proposal. I opened it out of curiosity. Then I stopped breathing. It was a concept deck, a prototype, from 7 years ago. My design, my framework. But the file name? CW_optimized strategy _2017. I clicked through, and it all came rushing back. It was the pitch I had crafted late one weekend, thinking it had been scrapped. But he had saved it, edited the file properties, stripped my name, sent it to an outside firm, and they had loved it. The project never went anywhere publicly, but the feedback was glowing. It was the first time I saw a documented chain of him directly taking credit for something I built alone. I should have felt rage, betrayal, but instead, I felt peace. Because this confirmed everything. I had not imagined the gaslighting, the slow erosion of confidence, the years spent wondering if I was just not enough. It was real, and I had still survived. I had still risen. That night, I sat on my balcony with a drink in hand, city lights stretching out in every direction, and I let myself feel something I had never allowed before. Pride. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just the quiet, unshakable pride of someone who got out, leveled up, and never had to become a monster to do it. But as I watched the traffic below, I realized there was one more thing I needed to do. Something final. Because what I did next made sure no one like Chuck would ever rise unnoticed again. The following Monday, I called a meeting with our executive team. Nothing flashy. No drama. Just a quiet conference room, a whiteboard, and an idea that had been growing in me for years. I started with a question. How do we make sure no one here ever feels the way I once did? People looked around, confused at first. Then I walked them through the silent kind of abuse, the undermining, the theft of credit, the culture of fearsome leaders weaponize. The kind Chuck had perfected. And I proposed something bold. We would implement a traceable contribution policy. A transparent digital paper trail for every major initiative. Shared credits. Author tags. Archive drafts. No more vanishing authors. No more stolen work. But more than that, I pushed for something deeper, a culture clause in our hiring process. An ethics screen. A panel of employees across departments who could flag cultural red flags before someone stepped into leadership. Not perfect, but a start. To their credit, the team listened. And they agreed. We rolled it out within weeks. Quietly, without fanfare. But it sent a message. We do not reward manipulation here. We build together. And somewhere inside me, a knot I had carried for years finally loosened. But then came the email. From a recruiter. Subject line, request for reference, Charles Whitmore. Apparently, Chuck was applying to another firm in our city. And someone, somewhere, had listed me as a potential professional contact. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I clicked reply. And I wrote a reference. Not glowing. Not cruel. Just honest. I told them the truth. That Chuck was smart, persuasive, and experienced. But he left behind a trail of broken teams and silenced talent. I said I could not recommend him for any role involving leadership, mentorship, or team development. I had sinned, and that was it. No drama, no vengeance, just accountability. But later that night, I got one more message, one that forced me to rethink everything I believed about closure. It came in just after midnight, one of those hours when the world feels quiet and strange, when even the city outside my window slows to a murmur. I had been up late, flipping through analytics reports with half a drink still sitting untouched on the table. My inbox pinged. The sender? Charles Whitmore. No subject line. Just his name and a timestamp that made it feel like a ghost had reached out from the past. My first instinct was to delete it. I hovered over the trash icon, finger tense. What could he possibly want now? An apology? A fight? A second chance? But something made me click. The message was short. No fancy formatting. No signature block. Just raw, unpolished text like he had typed it fast, afraid he might lose his nerve if he waited too long. Here's what it said. I know you told the truth. I would have done the same. I want you to know, when I saw you in that room, I felt shame for the first time in a long time. Not because you had power, but because you earned it. And I never did. I hope someday I learn how to. That was it. No request. No explanation. Just that. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. It felt like something inside me had cracked open, not in a painful way, but in a strange, freeing way. This was not the Chuck I had known. This was not the polished executive who could talk circles around a room. This was not the man who used to dismiss me in front of the entire team just to feel taller. This was something different. Honest. Wounded. Human. And it hit me. This man who once made my life a slow-burning misery was now, in his own broken way, trying to understand what he had become. He was not begging for forgiveness. He was not angling for redemption. He was just recognizing what he had lost. I expected to feel smug. I expected some deep, satisfying wave of closure. But instead, all I felt was quiet. Not sadness. Not victory. Just stillness. Because the truth is, I had already moved past him. Long before this message. Long before the interview. Long before that file I found in the archive. I had built something better. Not just a career, but a version of myself that did not need his approval anymore. The man I had become did not live in the shadow of Chuck Whitmore. Still, I never hit reply. Not because I was angry. Because I did not need to. That message was not really meant for me. It was for him. A confession sent into the night, maybe not expecting an answer. Just needing to be said. And maybe that is what real closure looks like. Not a confrontation, not a clean win. Just two people, finally seeing the truth and quietly walking away from it. But the real ending, the final, unexpected twist, was still waiting. And it started with a chance meeting in the most unlikely place. 3 months passed. Life returned to its usual rhythm, product launches, hiring rounds, late-night planning sessions. Chuck's message faded into the background like an old photograph I no longer needed to keep looking at. And then, out of nowhere, I saw him again. It was a Friday afternoon. I had taken the team out to celebrate a small but hard-earned milestone. Just a casual lunch at a rooftop spot we liked. The kind of place with mismatched chairs, loud music, and great tacos. We were laughing over something ridiculous, some bug that had cost us a whole day, when I spotted him across the patio. Charles Whitmore. Sitting alone. No laptop. No phone. Just a notebook and a coffee that looked long cold. He had not seen me. He was scribbling something, eyes unfocused, like a man deep in his own head. He looked different. Smaller, not in size, but in presence. Quieter. Less curated. I thought about walking over. Thought about what I might say. But I didn't. Instead, I just watched for a moment longer, then turned back to my team. The people who had helped me build something from the ground up. People who challenged me, trusted me, saw me. And in that moment, I realized something. I did not need a final word. I did not need a confrontation, or a handshake, or some neatly tied-up ending. I had already won. Not because I had beaten him, but because I had outgrown the need to. He had taken years from me, years of self-doubt, of feeling small. But he had also, unintentionally, taught me everything I needed to build the life I now had. He was the storm I learned to navigate. And now, I was the one on steady ground. So I let him sit there, alone with his notebook, alone with his thoughts. I raised a glass with my team, toasted to our future, and let the past finally stay where it belonged, behind me. Because dignity does not always shout. Sometimes it just smiles and walks away.